Good evening and welcome to Current Issues. I'm your host, Hesham Tillawi. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the second hour. In this second hour, we will be speaking with a Palestinian American Catholic who was born in Detroit and an American Jewish man from New York. They both co-founded the International Solidarity Movement. What the International Solidarity Movement is, it's an organization that has a lot of affiliates all over the world. It is young people from all sorts of different walks of life who decided to go and help the Palestinian people in their dilemma. I have met some of them during my travel to Palestine. And I can tell you, these young men and women, and not just young men and women, I have met older people too, retired people, all kind of different people from all over the world, people who speak English, Spanish, French, Portuguese, from all over the world, have answered the call to go to Palestine and help the Palestinians. They have acted as human shield in front of Israeli bulldozers destroying Palestinian homes. And as a matter of fact, the movement lost people of its own people, died defending Palestinians and Palestinian homes. One that comes to mind is Rachel Corrie, who lost her life when an American-made bulldozer driven by an Israeli soldier ran her over and she died. The International Solidarity Movement has asked people from all over the world, civilians, to go and help the Palestinians. Huwaida Arraf and Adam Shapiro are these two people that I'm talking about who have started the International Solidarity Movement and have actually, one of their main projects, actually one of the projects they were involved in is the olive harvest. Olive, ladies and gentlemen, is a substantial and a principal factor in the Palestinian economy. It's one of the main products that Palestinians produce. The Israeli occupation army and their Israeli or Jewish settlers who are illegally living on Palestinian land interfere with the Palestinians who are trying to harvest their olive. The International Solidarity Movement has sent people over there to help. Now, as you know, some of them can't go back. Some of them have been deported. Some of them have been roughed up. They're wounded. And as I have mentioned, Rachel Corrie have died. We will talk more about the organization, and we'll go more in details about what this organization is all about and what it was and what it is now. I believe I do have Huwaida and Adam with me. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, good evening, Sam.
Hi, Huwaida. Hi, Adam. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Huwaida and Adam, let's start with, how did you guys meet?
Actually, we met in April of 2000. I had recently graduated, finished my undergraduate degree at the University of Michigan, and accepted a job out in Jerusalem to work for an American-based organization that worked on conflict resolution. It worked to bring Israeli and Palestinian youth together to talk, to get to know each other in the hopes of building a new generation of leaders in the future that wouldn't be basing their policies on stereotypes of the other. And we know these conflict resolution programs and dialogue programs. It was, like I said, an American-based program, but it worked mainly with Israelis and Palestinians, and so it had an office in Jerusalem. And our job in Jerusalem was to do follow-up with the kids, to plan programs for them where they visit each other, where they get to see each other's homes and spend more time with each other. I accepted a job with that program, but this was April of 2000, and I was a program coordinator, and Adam was the interim director of what was called the Center for Coexistence in Jerusalem.
Okay.
But soon after we met in April of 2000, the Intifada broke out in the end of September 2000, and I didn't stay very much longer with the organization because I felt that the situation was becoming a lot more drastic, and why I still believe that dialogue is important and conflict resolution programs are important. I also believe that there's a time where people need to move past just talking to each other and actually need to act on their knowledge. But that's how we met, and actually for the first year that we knew each other, our relationship was very cold. It was very cold, actually. But we warmed up a little bit after that, I guess, in the trenches.
I see. You see, I asked you how you met. I didn't want to ask Adam because normally men don't remember dates. So I kind of spared him the agony of trying to remember. Adam, tell me, I mean, you as a Jewish man from New York, what took you to Jerusalem to help the Palestinians?
Well, I too originally was out in Jerusalem working between Palestinians and Israelis, trying to foster dialogue and understanding between the two sides. But when the Intifada began, and I saw for myself, and in Ramallah, in other parts of the occupied West Bank, in Gaza, and saw for myself exactly how brutal the occupation forces were.
Well, tell me how brutal the occupation forces were and still are.
Well, I mean, I saw for myself how live ammunition on top of tear gas, rubber bullets, beatings, physical hand-to-hand beatings, and, the increasing use of lethal force by Israeli soldiers against what, for the beginning of this Intifada, was overwhelmingly, if not wholly, unarmed civilian resistance. And I can honestly say that for myself.
Are you still with us? What happened? We lost them? We lost them? Okay. Are you with us? Okay. Do we know what's going on? What is going on? You're going to call him back, so we just lost the call. We dropped the call. Okay. Just make sure we go on the landline. Well, we were on the landline. Okay, we're going to try to get them back, and then we will talk about the international solidarity movement that they have started. And I can tell you the movement has a lot of branches all over the world. And it's just young people leaving there, taking a semester out of their college school and or their college studies, and going to Palestine to help the Palestinians. I can tell you that the Israelis now, they really put a lot of strict. They're a lot stricter on who they let in the country and who not, because the international solidarity movement was one of the resources for the Palestinians who was coming back and actually bringing the real story and the true story of what is going on in Palestine, since thanks to our media was not doing it. So these people took it upon themselves to actually go there, get the story, and come back and write about it to their newspapers and on their blogs. As a matter of fact, I have learned a lot from the international solidarity movement people on the field, right there on the ground, with their minute-to-minute blogs. As a matter of fact, Adam and Huwaida went to the Jenin camp when, if you remember the big massacre in Jenin at the beginning of the Intifada. They were actually one of the first people to break that siege that was around Jenin, to go see what was happening in Jenin. You remember the big massacre that took place in Jenin at that time, and as a matter of fact, the United Nations wanted to send a special team to investigate. But of course, thanks to the powerful Israeli lobby in the United States have interfered and actually interfered with the United Nations from sending this particular team. And no investigation was ever took place in the when it came up to that massacre. As a matter of fact, a lot of massacres go on daily basis in Palestine that the media does not carry these stories, and you don't get them on your in your media. Do I understand we have them back? No? Okay. All right, we have them back?
Yep. Can you hear us?
Yes, great. I don't know what happened. Apparently we probably dropped the call. Tell me, let's talk about when the Intifada first started, and you guys actually were probably, well, let's go back a little bit. Tell me about the international solidarity movement. How did you guys start it? Because I know it's like I've met people from all over the world, Adam, in Palestine, who were part of the ISM. Tell me, how were you able to get hold of all these people?
Well, actually, it started shortly after the Intifada started. If you recall, Adam was just saying how he was greatly affected by the fact that he was an American citizen, and knowing that it was his tax dollars that were being used and his government support that was being used to finance the occupation and making the killing and the oppression of Palestinians possible. And so it started with a few of us that were living and or working in the occupied Palestinian territories that tried to figure out how to use our status also as foreign nationals to try to affect the situation, because we took part in Palestinian demonstrations and we saw that Israeli soldiers had no qualms about opening fire on unarmed civilians. A statistic that most people don't know, because Intifada in the mainstream media was so largely blamed on Palestinians and not what Israel was doing that led to the Intifada, and even the fact that the beginning of the Intifada was all nonviolent, unarmed demonstrations that was responded to by the Israeli military with heavy violence and heavy fire. During the first month of the Intifada, in demonstrations that we participated in, nonviolent demonstrations, after the first month, 144 Palestinians had been killed, and no Israelis had been killed, because Palestinians, again, they were unarmed popular demonstrations expressing frustration at Israel's continued occupation, confiscation of more land, cementing the occupation under the guise of a peace process. And so as the violence kept getting worse, and Palestinians, for the most part, taken to the streets and getting shot dead, these nonviolent demonstrations died down, and then those that had arms in Palestinian society, political factions or security forces, just started using them in an attempt to fight back, not in a strategic way, because Palestinians don't have a military. Palestinians can't face up to Israel militarily. Israel is one of the most powerful militaries in the world, but it was a sense of you have to try to do something. And so, but again, if you turn the Intifada into an armed resistance, most of your society, which I think is our strength as the Palestinian people, our right and the strength and the unity of our society, most of us can't participate. So we were looking for ways to reinvigorate the popular unarmed resistance, but at the same time recognizing why Palestinians were reluctant to take to the streets. I mean, years and years and years of struggle, mainly nonviolent, and the occupation getting worse, and then all being blamed on the Palestinians with Israel being heavily armed and basically endorsed by the international community. And so looking for ways that we could give Palestinians a resource by which to continue organizing and resisting, that's how we decided to try to use our status as internationals. And what we did was just put out a call on the internet at first to anyone that would listen. We had hoped, dreamed that maybe thousands of people would come and we would form this huge nonviolent civilian army that would block the Israeli military from coming into Palestinian villages. But at the same time, we didn't think one person would be crazy enough to come, because what I heard from my parents who live in the United States was that things were looking very bad on television, and it was a war zone practically, so really would anyone come? But we put out this call on the internet, and we organized this 2-week campaign, and 50 people came. You know, it wasn't the thousands we had dreamed of, but 50 people, mainly from the United States and the United Kingdom, came to join us, and we had a 2-week campaign where we where we organized and carried out actions that confronted and challenged the Israeli occupation in itself. For example, we removed roadblocks, we marched on checkpoints, and after that campaign, those 50 people went back to their home countries, and they told other people about what they saw and what they experienced, and encouraged other people to come, and encouraged us to organize other campaigns. And that's really how it started. We started organizing more campaigns and putting out more information about what we were doing, and people were telling other people, and it started picking up. And now it's about 5 years later, and as you said, there are people from all over the world. It's about 3,500 people, by our estimates, have come in the last 5 years from over 30 different countries. And these are people really, as you also mentioned, all different age groups. The youngest you can be if you're not Palestinian, if you're coming from outside to join us, is 18. You have to be a responsible adult age. But we've had people up to over 80 years old come from all different countries, all different socioeconomic backgrounds, all different religions, and really joining together occupation, for freedom and against the occupation. And we're hoping that will continue to grow. I know you said that they're coming to help the Palestinian people. We like to look at it more as they're coming to join a very just struggle for freedom. And it's not help, it's join us, it's join the Palestinian people. Because we believe, because we share the same universal values that reject oppression and reject occupation and reject granting rights based on race, religion, or ethnicity, and believe in equality. And in that sense, we can all join hands. And if you can come to the occupied territories to join us there, we welcome you there. And if you can't, there's so much that you can do from where you are.
Okay. Adam, when you were in Palestine and you witnessed the brutality of the Israeli army, being Jewish, did that have any special effect on you, being Jewish? I mean, like, these are my people, or actually, they're doing it in my name, in the name of my religion. Did that have any special effect on you?
Well, I don't really identify myself, in terms of as like a religious person or of any faith, really. So I don't really identify as Jewish, but I was cognizant and recognized that in every pronouncement that every Israeli leader made, and of course a lot of American politicians would make, that this was being done in the name of, first and foremost, Jewish people, secondly, for freedom-loving people, for people who want democracy and all of these things, and certainly recognizing the kind of support that Israel receives from, the American government. I certainly understood and resented that in some way this was being done in my name, in the name of my ancestors, in the name of other people of goodwill and of good faith who would not stand up for and who would not accept this kind of injustice and brutality committed in their name. And I really think it is an abuse of the history of the Jewish people, to be honest, that it is used and manipulated as a justification for injustice, for oppression, for crime, for brutality, for dispossession, for the atrocities that have been committed upon the Palestinian people. And so, although I personally didn't take offense as a Jewish person per se, I can certainly say I understood how the identity issue was utilized. And I can say this, that I don't think that most people, if they had the experience that I did, or even half the experience, a quarter of the experience that I did, people of any faith, if they stood where I stood and saw what I saw, that anybody would say that this is okay to do this in my name or in the name of my people, whether it's a religion-based identity or an ethnicity-based identity or a national-based identity. And so, that's one thing that was so powerful about the ISM, is that we've been able to bring in people from all walks of life, but especially also including American Jews, European Jews, Israeli Jews, to come in and see for themselves. And I can tell you, not one person who comes and who sees what's going on with their own eyes in the occupied territories leaves thinking that whatever is being done is okay.
Okay. I know you guys were very much, during the siege of Arafat. I mean, we saw you all over the television screens, basically going into the compound where Arafat was besieged within. Tell me, I mean, didn't you think that was dangerous for you to do? And how did you break through the Israeli lines, though, to get to the Arafat compound?
Well, on that day, I was riding on an ambulance, escorting a Palestinian ambulance around the city of Ramallah, because other ambulances that did not have a foreigner on board were being stopped. Ambulance drivers were being arrested, and basically medical services to the city, to the citizens of the city, were almost completely cut off. So I had started escorting an ambulance with the hope that my presence on that ambulance would enable it to move around, and sure enough, it was effective. And then when we received word from the compound that there were injured people inside who needed medical attention, including at least one person who was severely injured and who needed to receive immediate medical attention, it was decided that we would go to the go to the compound to try to get the ambulance inside, bring in medicine and assistance, and then take out whoever needed to go to the hospital. I spent about 3 hours negotiating, just simply standing in front of an Israeli tank that was parked outside the compound and shouting to the people inside the tank and explaining why I felt they needed to let us inside. And ultimately, I don't know what led them to allow me to finally enter, but ultimately, we received an agreement that we could enter with the ambulance and with the medical personnel and go inside. It was after they let us in that when the ambulance was leaving and it was full, I had to wait behind, and the idea was that the ambulance would come back to pick me up with more medicine and more relief supplies, that when the ambulance tried to leave with the injured people, the ambulance was detained. The people, including the injured, were taken to an Israeli military base, and I was left stranded inside the compound and endured, the first night of the siege on Arafat's compound and the great violence that occurred at that time. And when I did leave the compound the next day, I ended up helping carry the body of a man, a Palestinian man who all he had done was stand up at one point to stretch, and happened to be in front of a window overnight, and was shot and killed by an Israeli sniper. And I helped carry his body out the next day.
Okay. You did go to Jenin camp after the massacre of Jenin. I believe you were probably, or the ISM. I don't know. Were you one of the internationals who went into the Jenin camp first?
That time is kind of hard to explain. We had really crisis, humanitarian crisis going on in every Palestinian city, with the Israeli military invading and carrying out operations in almost every Palestinian city except for one. And we did not have enough internationals or others to try to mobilize to really do much about it. But we tried. And unfortunately, Jenin is not one of the places that we got to before the Israeli military invaded. And though we tried to send people while the invasion and while the operation was taking place, the small groups that we sent did not succeed in entering Jenin until most of the atrocities and the killing had already been committed. They were in outside villages, and what they were doing was interviewing a lot of the people that had been taken prisoners, that had been removed from their homes and taken prisoners by the Israelis. And then they ended up going in, and Adam and I ended up following a few days later whereas before that we were training people and trying to respond in Ramallah and in Nablus and in Bethlehem. The Church of the Nativity was under siege. As you mentioned, Arafat's compound was under siege. Ramallah was the first city invaded, and then Bethlehem, and then Nablus, and then Jenin. And we just didn't have enough people to be able to be in all of these places. But we did eventually get in and interview a lot of the people, and we saw the destruction and a lot of international.
Huwaida, let me ask you this. Being an international and having a holder of a passport, let's say from a Western country, at one time it used to really worth something. Tell me, I mean, can really a passport protect you in Israel? Is there any value to a Western passport in Israel? Because I know the movement lost people to Israeli brutality. One of them is Rachel Corrie, for instance. You know, her being an American did not protect her from being killed by the Israelis.
Well, there are two ways to answer that question, or really there are two answers. One, the reason we started the international solidarity movement is to try to, like I said, reinvigorate the Palestinian popular resistance. We don't think that there should be any kind of this, discrimination between a Palestinian and a non-Palestinian. But the reality of the situation is Israeli soldiers on the ground do discriminate. They have effectively, or Palestinians have effectively been dehumanized in their eyes. And then also we've noticed on a larger level, on a higher level with the upper echelons of the Israeli military and the Israeli government, that they feel more of a responsibility in a sense when they injure or kill an international, because they're questioned and held accountable, whereas no one has held them accountable for the thousands of Palestinian lives that they've extinguished. So we felt that by injecting internationals, bringing them in, you give Palestinians a little bit more hope and strategize together to take to the streets together. We didn't want just the internationals out there, but we did want their support and solidarity, and we did want to take out there together. And in the beginning, we felt that having international presence would make Israeli soldiers think twice about firing live ammunition at us or really acting to kill. And that slowly started to change. It made us question whether this is still the case or not. And it started slowly by, at first, having people just slander us, really saying that these internationals are propaganda ploys. They're paid by the Palestinian Authority. They're paid by Yasser Arafat. Then they started shooting at us, but not directly at us, at our feet or above our heads, the walls behind us. Then they started really massively trying to deport people, just arrest them and deport them. And we've had many, many people deported, and they still do that. Then an international was shot in the leg, another international was shot in the stomach. It was still, they were stepping up the violence, but not really taking action to kill anybody. Then, as you mentioned, Rachel Corrie was the first international that was killed in the occupied Palestinian territories that was with the ISM. She wasn't the first holder of a Palestinian passport or of an international passport that were injured and killed. You had Palestinian Americans also that were injured and killed before that. But she was a non-Palestinian American citizen that was killed. And whether or not it was deliberate, we might never know, because the Israeli military, the Israeli government, has never agreed to allow an independent investigation, as her parents have asked, and as even the American government actually asked for an independent investigation, and the Israeli government has never allowed it. So whether it was intentional murder, we don't know. But what we do know is the fact that that soldier that ran her over was never held accountable, and in fact, almost immediately, his commander said that he was not at fault and blamed Rachel for her own death. And then all of the propaganda and the efforts of the Israeli government and their supporters to say that it was Rachel's own fault for jumping in front of that bulldozer. What was she doing in Gaza anyway? That kind of cover-up, in a sense, gave the green light to soldiers, telling them that they won't be held accountable. And we saw what that meant, because less than 3 weeks later, another American citizen, Brian Avery, was shot in the face when a soldier, Brian was in plain view, a soldier not very far in front of him, in an armored personnel carrier, opened fire with his machine gun right at him. And 5 days after that, another soldier targeted, deliberately sniped at another foreign citizen, Tom Herndal from the UK.
Huwaida, wasn't it the United States Congress was going to actually do an investigation on Rachel's killing, and then somebody somehow pulled that out of the agenda?
No, what happened exactly is Rachel's parents spent a lot of time in Washington, a lot of time with congresspeople lobbying and asking for a resolution to be passed calling for an independent investigation. And that resolution did get a number of signatures, I think about 50. It went up to maybe around, I forget the exact number, 60, 70 signatures of Congress calling for an independent investigation. That resolution was never acted on. Basically, it died in committee. You need some kind of political will. We needed someone to take it to the floor, and that never happened. So some Congress people kind of just put their names on it, and it's good that they did, but there was never really that push to get it out of committee and really make it happen.
Okay. Adam, is it easy for internationals to go to the Palestinian territories now?
No, absolutely not. In fact, Israel has basically created a war on anybody who holds a foreign passport who wants to try to gain access to the Palestinians. It is absolutely impossible today to show up at any of the borders, all of which Israel controls, and say that you are there to see, to work with, to visit, to do anything with the Palestinian people.
Do you guys have any people on the ground in the West Bank or Gaza?
We do have people on the ground right now, and it takes a lot of patience and smarts to get in. But if you were to just sort of openly and honestly say, I'm going to the occupied territories to work with the ISM, you will be shown the exit immediately. So it is quite remarkable that we have people at all. I mean, not only internationals are being denied, but also Palestinians who have dual citizenship are being denied entry as well. So there's a full-on war to make access to the Palestinian territories impossible.
Okay, tell me about the Jewish settlers.
This has been a part of Israel's strategy in attempting to get as much Palestinian land as possible with as little of the people as possible. They haven't gone all out and brought in buses to carry the Palestinians out, because that would clearly be visible ethnic cleansing. But no, they slowly steal land, and they make it almost impossible for Palestinians to stay on their land, especially with the building of this wall that has closed off Palestinians, isolated them from each other, taken and destroyed their land, and taken land, the most valuable thing to Palestinians, especially farmers, and so their ability to feed their family. And also when you surround Palestinian villages, towns, and cities with this barricade, and they cannot get in and out except for special permission and going through Israeli soldiers, this means they don't have access to school easily. They cannot get to hospitals. They cannot get to places of work. And on top of that, you've destroyed their orchards. So it becomes a question of staying where you are and really dying, not being able to feed your children, or trying to leave. And that's what they really want. They want the Palestinians to leave, and in a way that it won't look like Israel has actually carted them off. But that is what they're doing. And so from that point of view, it becomes understandable that they don't want internationals to see or to come in or to be able to complain about this or to give Palestinians hope in any way. They want to completely isolate Palestinians and shut them off from the rest of the world, and completely extinguish any kind of hope that they have in ever being able to lead a normal life. So they will look to somehow leave.
Okay.
It's a very dangerous thing, and we really need to, although Adam said that it's very difficult to get in, we don't want to discourage people from getting in. ISM volunteers from all over the world are still going and still trying, and people still are, managing to get in by not directly saying that you support the Palestinians or want to see what's happening. But we can't let them do that. That's
Okay,
the thing. We can't let them do it.
We're going to go to the phones now. We have some callers waiting. Let's go with Dale on line one. Go ahead, Dale.
Yes, Dr. Tillawi. What kind of control do the Israels have over the United States that we never say anything about the wrongs that they do? And not only that, the news media, the syndicated news never shows anything about Palestine and the Palestinians and what the Israelis are really doing to them. And, all of these movie stars that help these people in other countries, why are they not focusing on the Palestinians? I mean, what is keeping America totally focused away from Israel and Palestine? I don't understand.
Very good, Dale. Very good questions. Thanks. Adam or Huwaida, did you hear the questions?
Yes, we did. And this could be the topic of at least a week's worth of shows, I think, for your program. But in short answer, I think that there is a decades-long history now of close cooperation between a few key lobbying groups here especially here in Washington. The Jewish lobby, the pro-Israel Jewish lobby is number one. The pro-Israel Christian Zionist lobby, which is increasing in strength, but is not a new phenomenon. It's not something that just showed up when George Bush got elected in 2000. Is the second factor. I think the military-industrial complex, which benefits greatly from the $3 billion of military aid that the U.S. gives to Israel every year, is another area. I think increasingly new technology areas and the biotechnology sector is another area where there's close cooperation, business cooperation between Israel and the United States. That influences very heavily on Congress in particular and on elected officials. And unfortunately, here in the United States, the pro-Palestine side of things, our efforts to lobby, we don't have as much money, we don't have as many votes, or at least we can't muster people to vote on this issue as effectively as the pro-Israel lobby can get people to vote on Israel as a single issue. And of course, various aspects of media play into that. And it has to do with access to the system. It has to do with being able to effectively make an argument and to stand up to spurious accusations of anti-Semitism. We see every person who dares to speak out against what Israel is doing, there's an attempt to silence him or her. And so the recent cases of people like Dr. Rashid Khalidi in New York are expected, of course, because Dr. Khalidi is a Palestinian, but also Professor Tony Jutt from New York University, who is Jewish, they have also attempted to silence him because he is critical of Israel. There is a very well-financed campaign among a number of organizations here in the U.S. to silence immediately any criticism of Israel with the threat of the libel, essentially, of anti-Semitism hanging over anybody who dares to give forum or venue to people who express critical opinions of Israel.
Adam, the caller brought up an excellent point. I mean, we understand what kind of control the Israel lobby has over the country and what kind of control they have over the media. But she brought up a good point. Why we don't see like movie stars? I know I can think of one of them. He did go there. I can't think of his name now. But why we don't see like people who are famous trying to bring out the Palestinian plight to people?
I think there's one. There have been a few. There have been people like, for instance, Richard Gere has gone to the Palestinian territories, and Daniel Day-Lewis visited Gaza, and the soccer player Ronaldo visited Palestinian camps. So there have been some. It's not as well covered, certainly, by the media. But I think there's one underlying factor, which is that it's the dominance and I think the unfortunate dominance of the peace paradigm with regards to Palestinians and Israelis. And so if there's anything that movie stars or anybody else will get behind, it's trying to promote peace. However, peace has not meant justice for Palestinians. Peace has not meant end to occupation or end to the apartheid system that exists in the Palestinian territories. And so what you do have, you will find people like Brad Pitt, Jennifer Aniston, and others who've gotten behind various peace initiatives towards Israel and Palestine, but those peace initiatives don't really mean justice and honestly don't really mean peace for the Palestinian people. And some blame for that actually has to go to, I think, the PLO leadership that signed the Oslo Accords that helped make it seem like the peace paradigm was something that was legitimate to the Palestinian people as well. And that quickly was realized after 1993 and 1994 that this was not the case. However, there's been a lack of effort to educate the public that peace, when it comes to Israel and Palestine, actually means a continuation of injustice, a continuation of oppression and dispossession.
Now, Huwaida, do you think, Adam mentioned peace and justice. Do you think we can ever have peace with justice between the Palestinians and the Israelis? And if we can, tell me how it might look like.
I think it can happen, but you have to get past one very crucial stumbling block, and that is the notion that some people are entitled to more rights because they are of a certain race or religion. And so we see on a very personal level, Israelis and Palestinians can get along. And a lot of people call for living together. But the problem is that successive Israeli governments have been, and even today, you hear sadly, a lot of the Israeli people and the Jewish people feel that there has to be a Jewish state, majority Jews, and so what you have to do in order to have that happen is to institute racist policies against non-Jews, because there are non-Jews that live within Israel proper, and certainly there are Palestinians, Christians, and Muslims that live within the Israeli borders. But because Israel is so concerned about keeping Israel a Jewish state, they impose onerous restrictions on this non-Jewish population and have a very vibrant program that they invest a lot of money in to bring Jews from all over the world to keep Jews the majority. And certain rights are granted to people based on whether or not they're Jewish. And so Israel rejects any kind of notion of living together and erasing these barriers between us. Like, why don't we live in just one country? Jews and Christians and Palestinians, Israelis and Palestinians together, Muslims, all of us together, no boundaries. They don't want that. They can't have that. So they say that they're for a two-state solution now, but they virtually also made that impossible because they have destroyed Palestinian infrastructure, chopped it up, are building a wall. So instead of Palestinians ever being able to have a contiguous, viable state, they've created cantons and want Palestinians to accept that. And when they raise their voices to say, we can't accept this, we can't live like this, they impose it by military force. That's what we have. It's not that we can't get along. I mean, we have more similarities than we have differences. I know my parents were first very nervous about meeting Adam's parents, and then when they got together, they had more similar things to talk about and different things to talk about. But we have this notion that that there is to be special rights non-Jewish.
Okay, now let me ask you something, Huwaida. The two solutions that are put out there is, number one, have one state where Palestinians and Israelis would live in one, and then the other one is have two separate states. And the way I understand it, the Palestinians are very much open to either one of those. Is that correct?
Yes. Now, the official position of the Palestine Liberation Organization, which is the official representative of the Palestinians the Palestinian people, not just in the occupied territories, but all around the world, their official position is a two-state solution, and so a Palestinian state to be created in the 1967 borders, which is West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem. And a lot of the Palestinian people support that, but a one-state solution to include all of historic Palestine, so what is now Israel, then the West Bank, Gaza, all of Jerusalem, one state for two peoples, that has never really been talked about or really been advocated within Palestinian society. And yet, the last poll that was taken of Palestinians in the occupied territories, just asking them, would you agree to a one-state solution, about approximately 30% of the people said yes, which is an amazingly high number considering that's really never talked about. And most Palestinians, all they know of Israelis are violent settlers or oppressive and violent soldiers. And yet almost 30% of them said yes, we would live in one state if we had equal rights. So I think if there is more of a discussion on this, it would be very possible.
Okay.
But again, the official position is still a two-state solution. What we need, I think, first of all, is to pressure Israel to end its occupation or comply with UN resolutions and international law. So this is pull out of the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem, end its occupation, and then the two sides can come together to the negotiating table and decide on what their future would look like, whether it be a two-state solution or a one-state solution. But as it stands right now, Israel is expecting Palestinians to just succumb under the gun, and and when they don't, when they raise their voice, they are shot and killed, as we're seeing, and that's never going to work, and the violence continues.
Adam, Huwaida mentioned a while ago the Jewish state, and my question to you is, the word Jewish, is that a derivative of Judaism, the religion?
I mean, from my understanding of what being Jewish is just simply as a religious identity. That's the way I relate to it. That's the way I understand it.
If it is,
I don't accept for myself that this is an ethnicity or a nationality. I see it only simply as a religious identity.
Okay, so if we take that to mean as a religion, most Jews who live in Israel are not the religious type. And as a matter of fact, I was reading an article last month for Uri Avneri, and he described himself as an atheist Jew, which is, to me, I always thought Jews were the followers of Judaism, but apparently it is not. Now, if it is not, then I know Christians think that God had given the land to the Jews. If the Jews themselves, the majority of Jews in Israel, are not the religious type, which means they don't believe in Judaism, these people, I mean, to themselves, how do they justify taking somebody else's land if they themselves don't believe in the religion?
I don't know if I would go so far to say that most Jews in Israel don't believe in the religion. I do think that most of them do not practice as faithfully to the texts as the Orthodox, for instance, do. I would say that despite, that most Israeli Jews would say that they are secular Jews, secular as related to in terms of that they are not Orthodox, they do not practice. I mean, Judaism, if you're going to follow the texts as the Orthodox do, you spend most of your time in prayer and in worship, and most Israelis don't want to do that. I don't think it's fair to say that they don't believe in the religion. But, to be honest, there's really nothing in the religion that says anything about that Israel as its nation state in the modern world is theirs and theirs alone and to the exclusion of anybody else. This is a product of Zionism, which is a political ideology in which has masterfully used religion and religious texts to justify what is essentially a European initiated national ideology, nationalist ideology that has been very well organized, very well funded, and very, very, very successful, not by dint of its moral character, but rather by brute force of its gun. And, I would say that most Israelis, regardless of how they feel about the faith, nonetheless would identify in some way as Zionist.
Huwaida, young Israelis, like the youth of Israel, do you see that they see a future with the Palestinians better than, do they see themselves living in a better situation than their older generations, like their fathers and grandfathers? Is there like a movement, a youth movement in Israel that says, you know what, it doesn't matter how we got here, if it was legal or illegal, we are here, it's a fact. It's a fact that there were people here before we came, so now we need to learn how to live together. Is there a movement in Israel as such?
Not a strong one. There are exceptions in that there are some people, and we've seen, with our work with the ISM and in the occupied territories, we've seen just these kinds of Israelis that have kind of broken past the barriers that their government and that their mainstream media put in front of them in dehumanizing the Palestinian people, and so have taken time to learn and have actually gone over and met with Palestinians and continue to stand and work with them. But the overwhelming majority, no. And this is very sad, but it's not surprising. It's not surprising when you monitor the Israeli media, when you monitor the rhetoric of the Israeli government. I mean, you have right now an Israeli minister that has called for the expulsion of all of the Palestinians. You have, very unfortunately, very racist people with racist ideologies within the Israeli government, and whenever they talk about Palestinians, they talk about them as terrorists. And when Israel's media projects this, it's very hard to break out of that. If we just want to look also here in the United States, when our government talks about the war on terror, and the media relates this, and every time you hear about Muslims, or if you hear about the Middle East, it's generally in the context of how our government is framing it, of people that hate our freedoms. It becomes a little bit more difficult to break past that. And so, there are some programs, there are some people that have gotten out of that, but for the majority of Israelis, and especially the Israeli youth, no, not right now. I think for the most part, they see Palestinians as their enemies, which is a very sad thing. And
Adam, as someone who is not Palestinian, but someone who has worked with the Palestinians for a while now, what do you see, looking at it from outside the box, what do you see that the Palestinians really, really need to change in their opinions or in their look towards Israel and the Jews?
Honestly, I don't know that they necessarily need to change too much of their opinion towards the Jews or towards Israel in particular, because I think a lot of what Palestinian opinion towards Israel is based on are two things. One is experience, and the other actually is kind of hope. I'm always amazed by Palestinians who look forward to the day of real peace when they can live side by side with Israelis, despite the fact of their experience over the last few decades with these people who have been oppressing them. So I think it's quite remarkable. What I would say, what I look from the outside, what I think is needed is a new global Palestinian strategy that invigorates the Palestinian community all over the world and involves their participation of Palestinian communities all over the world and incorporates new ideas, new strategies for how to have a movement in Palestine and around the world that is coordinated, that is effective, and that frames the issue for what it really is, one of ultimate freedom versus oppression.
Okay.
And I still find that even among very articulate...
All right. Huwaida and Adam, I apologize. We are completely out of time, and I also apologize for those who are waiting on the phone. Unfortunately, we did not get to some of these calls. I just want to say thank you for being on the program. It has been a pleasure, and hopefully we'll have you back here soon.
Thank you, Hesham. Good night.
Thank you, Hesham.
Thank you. Good night. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you next Thursday, 8 o'clock. Good night.
Hi.